Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start this afternoon off by first just saying thank you for taking the time to join us as we kick off the first of what will soon to be many HR training topics. Today, we are going to be discussing how to select the right HR and payroll system for your company. Today's session is going to be a high-level overview, but we will be creating some additional quick tip material on many of the areas that we will be discussing today that will dive much deeper into kind of the whys and hows of each area. So we'll be releasing these in the days ahead. We are so excited to be launching these sessions in order to provide a variety of topics and helpful hints to bring great success to your HR operations. My name is Colleen Reisman, and I am a senior HR consultant here with HR Tech Solutions. And I have just over about 10 years of experience in the HR field, varying experience across different industries and union environments, and have held a number of different HR responsibilities. So I'm really excited to be here talking to you all today. A couple of housekeeping asks. Please just be sure to utilize the chat feature throughout the session. We have a lot of information to get through today, and I want to make sure everybody's questions are received. So be sure to utilize that, and we have some team members standing by that can help answer those as they come through. At the end, we'll send out the list of questions and answers so everybody has access to those as well. At the end, we'll also discuss how you can view some future content and provide some access to our social media accounts if you don't already follow us. So be sure to stick around so you can stay up to date on all the great things that we'll be sharing. And at the conclusion, we'll also have a number of resources that we'll be sending out to those of you who are in attendance today via email. So watch for that to come through too. To jump in, through my time in HR, I really kind of enjoy looking back at the amount of changes that have come through the field in just the last 10 years. When I first started in HR, just as an example, I was working with 1,500 employees, and with the exception of payroll, all of our practices within the HR department were manual, were pen and paper, and truthfully, I don't know how we functioned. So it's really, really cool for me to sit here today and just explain all of the great things that can come from automating your HR practices, not just from the experience I have today with working with clients and doing this on a regular basis, but also from my personal experience and seeing the impact that having the right technology in place can have on your team. Before we begin, though, I want you to take some time and just think through a couple questions that I'm going to pose to you. And you can think about yourselves individually, your teams, or maybe you work with some clients. And I want you to think of these in the space of HR specifically, surrounding the use of HR technology, or perhaps the lack thereof. But I want you to ask yourselves the following and kind of think which bucket or buckets you may fit into. Are you an organization that's maybe still using pen and paper manual processes? Are you in a group that has a system in place, but maybe you don't know how to leverage that system to its full functionality? Do you have a system in place and you love the system, but you maybe want to add on to that existing system, add on some additional modules, and just enhance what that technology can do for you? Or are you in the group that's maybe working out of many systems and none of them or very few of them integrate with one another? If you've answered, yes, that's me, or I fall into one of those buckets, great news. You are in the right spot today. Today, we're going to be exploring the first step in automating and streamlining your practices, that system selection piece. And a lot of these questions and problems that I just posed to you can really be addressed at the beginning of this process, and if done well, can eliminate many challenges later on down the road. The key to system selection is not just focusing on today's challenges. That's very easy to do, but you also want to make sure that you're considering the future challenges related to things such as organizational growth, shifting employee needs, and even making sure that you're including the long-term goals of not just your HR or payroll teams, but the various teams throughout your organization. So some of you may be sitting here thinking, I'm in that first bucket. I have a manual process that's in place, but I work for a smaller company. And sure, it takes some time to complete, maybe a few extra minutes or hours, but it works. It gets the job done. Why should I start considering a new process or HR technology implementation? And there's a number of reasons why organizations choose to switch their processes, many of which were encompassed in those questions I just posed to you. But whether it's switching from one system to another or from manual pen and paper to full automation, these reasons really vary team by team. So why should you start? If you were in that group and you're using kind of those manual processes, if you really sit back and think, there's probably a lot of inefficient practices that you're experiencing. Maybe it's just extremely time consuming. Maybe it's in the redundancies that you see. Maybe it's in needing to backtrack because of human error. Maybe you're in the group that, you have a system in place and it's just, inefficient. It's not meeting the needs of today anymore. It was maybe a year or two ago, but no longer. And a lot of times we see this go hand in hand with organizational growth. You pick the system, it's working great, and then again, you find out a couple of years down the road, it's just not meeting those needs. And so now maybe is a good time to start considering a new technology platform, because there may be something out there that checks more of those boxes for you that you have a need for today. Another big one is compliance tracking needs. With a lot of the changes that we've seen recently over the last few years in labor laws and just the ever-changing practices, this has become a hot topic item. Even if you're in an organization that's grown significantly and now you're finding that there are new policies and regulations that you need to abide by, and you hadn't done that before, it can really pose a significant kind of time burden to the HR team. Maybe there's a lot of unknown with, reporting and what needs to be done. And so having some sort of technology in place can really help streamline some of that and help you identify what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and provide the resources and data to get the job done. The last one on this list, which can be a big issue for some people, is the lack of integration capabilities. Looking back maybe 6 to 8 years ago, people were probably getting really excited about bringing new technologies into their organizations, and they kind of apple picked. I want an LMS or a learning management system. I want a payroll system. I want a performance management system. And now they're finding that they have 3, 4, 5 different systems that work, but don't talk to each other. And that in turn can lead to some unintentional manual processes and inefficiencies that maybe weren't anticipated right off the bat. So now you're in that boat of wanting to find kind of that core solution of what can help bring all of these different pieces together into one solution. what a lot of people sometimes don't realize, and what I see with some clients, is the understanding of how widespread the functionalities can be in these different systems. And, these have changed a lot, even more recently than just the last 10 years, but in the last 3 to 5 years, as far as what these platforms offer. And again, today's very high level, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into the ins and outs of each of these areas, but I did want to take a couple minutes here just to highlight what these platforms can offer. The first on this list is employee management. And this has historically probably been one of the more HR administratively time-consuming tasks, pulling files, weeding through files. And so these platforms provide tools to really help reduce this administrative overhead by streamlining how employee information is both processed and accessed, which can really help save time and consequently money for your organization. Payroll features, of course, play a crucial role in your day-to-day practices. Everybody loves getting paid. So having a system in place that can help minimize compliance risks and avoid penalties or missed payments, and ultimately can help prevent costly financial errors is going to be so beneficial to not just the HR and payroll teams, but to the entire organization. Everybody will be happy they're getting paid correctly. An LMS, or a learning management system, can really help support the workforce development, building that bench strength, which, these systems are not only going to help build skills and capability of your team members, but it's going to help employees feel more valued and ultimately, give them a clear path of the next steps in their career and allow them to look forward to what may be in store for them down the road as they develop more and more skills. Ultimately, with a higher feeling of value and a clear guiding path of what their career could hold, this is ideally going to lead to lower turnover within your team and reduce all of those fun hiring costs that you may come across. Onboarding and recruitment, these two go hand in hand, but can take so much time. When you look at the time to fill a position, or how much time you spend going through applications or corresponding with candidates, or just the onboarding component, training and those follow-ups over their first 30, 60, 90 days, you're looking at a few months that has been dedicated to bringing on an employee. So why not make that easier? These features in a system can help speed up that hiring process, reduce those administrative costs, and create a structured, positive new hire experience, starting with the moment they walk in the door. Again, this can help with kind of maintaining and creating that retention with your new hires, reducing the chance of them leaving within the first 90 days, which we see as very pivotal part in their career and how long they'll stay long term. With regard to performance management, this is going to help provide some increased visibility for both managers and leaders in the organization, but also the employee. This is going to help with tracking and can help drive productivity, again, improving that transparency across the board, and ultimately reduce turnover related costs. If the employees know where they stand, hopefully it'll give them a nice nudge to continue putting their best foot forward. With regard to benefit administration, this is going to help you cut down on administrative and potentially some offer of coverage errors. A lot of times doing this process pen and paper can take a lot of time. There's a lot of different handoffs that take place between the employee, HR, and the broker, where having all of this in kind of a one-stop shop, whether it's in the system itself or via an integration, can help minimize that administrative time again, and also minimize some of those errors that may arise and ultimately save you some time and money and potential penalties. Time and labor features offer so much visibility into payroll costs, overtime tracking, and can really benefit the HR team. But I've also seen this play a huge role with finance and the finance teams as well, in being able to manage and set expectations for how labor costs are tracking, and can really help provide some good guidance and maybe some red flags on where there are some opportunities for efficiency. On the topic of opportunities for efficiency, reporting and analytics in general can provide some really good detailed information on your employees and organization. There's a lot of opportunity to create some custom reports and really dig into what you need to be successful in driving costs or goals with regard to the organization. This can really help with identifying, again, those opportunities for strategic planning and ultimately cost savings as well. Employee engagement is a big topic, and especially I think since post-COVID, having a lot of remote workforce, this has become more and more prevalent in organizations. So having a tool that gives staff more visibility, allows for recognition for those individuals who maybe aren't in the office or in the office regularly, and also provides a one-stop shop to company information, can foster that sense of kind of togetherness and value, and again, help reduce some of those turnover costs too. Last, but certainly not least, we have some compliance tools, which of course can ensure timely processing of different information, such as I-9s or EEO reporting. These can also help identify potential risk factors or errors that may have come up throughout the year, and can ultimately just help reduce the risk of costly fines or penalties related to not processing timely or properly. These are, again, just high-level overviews, but as you can see, modern systems really do offer a range of tools designed to drive efficiency, reduce costs, and overall improve the employee experience. So now that you have some insight into the different offerings of HR and payroll technologies, we're ready to kind of start taking the first steps in selecting a system. But before you begin, it's really important that you take into account a few things and keep some things in mind. I think this is kind of your prep work before you dive in. First and foremost, you're going to want to identify a budget. There's a lot of systems out there. It can be very overwhelming. So this can be a real easy way to help start to narrow down some of the systems based on cost point. But what a lot of individuals and teams don't realize up front are some of the different nuances in the cost of these systems. So I wanted to call out a couple things just to keep in mind as you're setting your budget. Many systems will have what's referred to as a per employee per month cost for different modules, as well, of course, as your upfront integration cost. There are also sometimes some one-off fees related to tax filing support or payroll-related costs for maybe like a manual check distribution. So it's important, again, to keep these in mind when you're establishing that initial budget. The second piece on this list is one of the most important, if not the most important, but can easily become the most difficult. And that's determining your needs versus your wants or maybe the nice to haves in a system. If you are maybe working in an antiquated system, you've had it in place for the last 15 years, or maybe you are one of those groups that is very manual pen and paper practice. When you look at a system, everything is going to look like a need because everything is going to be like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. This can help so much. But it's really important to not get overwhelmed with all of the great functionality that's out there now. Take a step back and really dive into the root of the bottlenecks and the inefficiencies. This will help it become easier to separate your needs versus your nice to haves and keep you kind of organized as you're going through the process. With regard to organization, we do like to use guides like what's up on your screen here, just to help with tracking that information as far as what you want versus what you need. And of course, some of these may change as you're going through as well, but just to have an upfront idea of what that is important. Another item to consider with regard to your needs versus your wants is taking into consideration some of your current practices and how they may need to be altered to meet certain system functionality. And I'll use PTO and time off accruals as an example. You may have a accrual process that works very well for you, but there may be a lot of ins and outs and nuances to that process. Maybe you are accruing time off, every week, and then the third Tuesday of the fourth month, you get an extra additional dump of time for whatever reason. And tracking manually may be very easy to do that. But a lot of systems and their functionality may not be able to fit some of those requirements. So you're going to be faced with a choice of, do you alter your current practice? And in this example, go to a monthly accrual, or is that a kind of knockout piece and that system doesn't meet the needs because you're not able to budge on that current practice? So it's important to keep some of that in mind. Of course, knowing there's no perfect system, there's not one that's going to check every single box, more than likely. So being able to have some of that flexibility in your approach is going to be important. Scalability, we've talked a little bit about this already. Are you a growing company? Do you have anticipated growth? And what does that look like? Being aware of this up front is going to help you make a better decision for long-term success with regard to your technology selections. Integration capabilities, again, is it something where you have some systems and you're willing to maybe do away with some of them and bring them into one core system? Or are you set on those existing kind of one-off systems and you want them to feed into or integrate with your new kind of core foundational piece of technology that's going to be your source of truth? Those are some things that you will want to establish the importance of those systems and how you want them to operate with your new technology up front. When it comes to the target implementation date, have a little bit of flexibility with this, but this is important to keep in mind because this is going to ultimately drive the roadmap of how much time you have to do some of these other steps in the process. Once you have that target implementation date, you can then move forward to kind of backtrack, I guess, really, to a target selection date of your system. When do you want to say, this is a system I'm using, because from there, then you'll be able to drive that process forward with implementation. And last but certainly not least, you're going to want to identify your key stakeholders, but you're going to want to do this in a couple different ways. One, you're going to want to identify who's involved, but you also want to identify what their role is going to be, not just in the selection process, but are they going to be involved in the implementation? And most times the answer to that question is going to be yes. So when they are involved, what are they going to be doing, and how much time are they going to be expected to dedicate to this process? Making sure that you're selecting individuals with not just the know-how and the operational knowledge to make this successful, but also have the time commitment available is going to help make this a successful process for you. So now that you're at the selection process, you're going to want to select 2 to 4 systems to demo. We recommend this just because any more than that can become a little overwhelming. From there, we're going to move forward to scheduling the demos. And as you are going through the demo process, it's important to have a checklist or something to help guide you through this process and keep track of the system functionalities kind of right in front of you. Using something like I showed on the last slide that captures both your wants and needs in addition to the system functionality will be extremely helpful when you come to the end of this and start to narrow down your platform choices and really hone in on which ones are going to allow you to be successful. From there, you may choose to facilitate some additional demos. This may be done, as needed. Maybe you want to take a deeper dive into a certain area of a system, or maybe there's just some that you want to take a second look at overall. And then ultimately, you're ready to select that new system. However, again, I want to reiterate the importance of having these key players involved in the review of the systems and also the selection process. It's important to have individuals from different aspects of HR, so your benefits, your payroll, your HR operations, to make sure that the system being selected is ultimately going to meet ideally all, but more practically most of the needs of these different areas. And again, having people with the time capacity and bandwidth to successfully see this process through and be engaged in the process. A lot of these demos can take, they can take anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours. It really just depends on how in depth you are going with the process. And the more in depth, the more successful you'll be. So a lot of times what we see are smaller teams or teams with a lot of maybe green employees, new to the field, struggle to find the time or have the resources and skills to successfully go through the selection process. So recognizing that up front will help you down the road for sure. Now you've selected your system. We are to the fun part of prepping for implementation. And I think this is the fun part because you get to see all of that hard work really come into focus here. And so the first step is, of course, you're going to want to get a formal contract. Once that's signed, you can move forward with getting a more established and detailed timeline for your specific project. Now, you'll get an idea of this through the demo process, but depending on what you ultimately choose to select, different modules and different functionalities of the system will drive that timeline and determine how many phases. A lot of times there's at least 2 phases to an implementation, but that will vary based on how much you're actually going to be bringing into the system. From there, you are going to want to start thinking about and compiling the documentation that is going to be needed in the new system. And this is going to be everything from reporting to general employee data. So it's, especially if you're using a system currently and you're moving from that system to a new system, making sure you're pulling any and everything out of that platform before you lose access to that system is going to be vital to the success of setting up your new system. So again, anything demographic, payroll related, employee details, tax or finance reports, and getting that out as soon as possible in order to remain compliant with document retention policies and ensure that you have the best data going into your new system. Of course, organization during this process is key. There are a lot of different tools that you can utilize. I've seen individuals leverage checklists, something like what we have up on the screen that allows you to dump some of that information and fill in some details up front. Can be really helpful. Having a shared drive or shared folder, especially if you're delegating out to other team members to compile this information, can help maintain that organization and still provide visibility into where things are at. And a lot of times people kind of get the misconception that this is a relatively simple process. I'm just writing reports. I'm just pulling some data. And in that sense, sure, it can be simple, but a lot of times it's underestimated how much time it can take to ensure that the data is accurate, documents are up to date, and as much of that information is accounted for as possible. As you are going through this process, you're going to want to keep in mind and prepare for some of the potential risks or challenges that may arise through the implementation process and identify some ways to mitigate these. So thinking of people going on vacation, or the bandwidth that your team has, and if outside or additional resources may need to be pulled in to support with project management or compiling some of this information. If you're using another system, how long do you have left in that contract to pull the information out? If you miss that deadline, a lot of times if you have to go back to that vendor, it could cost hundreds or thousands of dollars after the end of that contract to gain access to your historical records. And lastly, if you haven't done so yet, you're going to want to identify those key players in the implementation process and designate those responsibilities. Again, keeping in mind how much time they have, the skill set they have, and just making sure that you have the right people in the right place. The implementation process is not just the build out of the system. A lot of people think that that's it. And that typically leads to some challenges down the road. This is going to include obtaining the documents, project management, yes, attending meetings, of course, but also being engaged in those meetings. There's also the testing component of the system, creating SOPs, and training on that system to ensure that everyone who's going to be touching that platform knows how it works and can really help drive the success of that system and leveraging it in your organization. So before we conclude today, I just wanted to give a couple of highlights on some things to keep an eye out for and some exciting topics we'll be covering. Doing a lot of different deep dives into the different functionalities we've discussed today. We'll be reviewing a number of different helpful tips and tricks and HR misconceptions and discussing best practices in the field of HR, some of those different changes that we may see come up with regard to compliance, employment law, so on and so forth through our social media handles. So I encourage you, I'm going to flip to this slide here so you can scan our QR codes. Feel free to follow us on our different platforms. Go ahead and scan the QR code on your screen and stay up to date on all of the different information we're going to be sharing in the days and weeks and months ahead. If there is a topic that you are interested in, we'll be sending a survey out at the end of this webinar. So feel free to add in some different topics that you want to see featured, either in a webinar format or on our social media platform in kind of a quick tip format, and we'd be happy to consider that. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today on this very first webinar of ours. It's been so much fun spending the last 30 or so minutes with you, and I look forward to seeing you back for some future webinars. I hope you have a great rest of your day.